The ash rain on the planet Krylor did not fall, it hammered. It was a brutal, relentless assault from a sky that had not seen the sun in 3 centuries, a fitting weather system for a world governed by the philosophy of conquer or die. Ronin adjusted the collar of his thermal coat, the only thing standing between his fragile human skin and the freezing, toxic slush covering the courtyard of the Iron Citadel. He was not a soldier. He was not a conqueror. He was a xenolinguist and a diplomatic envoy from the Terran coalition, armed with nothing but a universal translator and a reckless amount of optimism. "Turn back, little flesh thing," grunted the guard at the massive obsidian gates. The guard was a Krylorian male, standing 7 feet tall, his skin the color of bruised granite covered in ceremonial scars. "High Warlord Xylia does not suffer weaklings. She will eat you before you finish your opening bow." Ronin looked up, rain dripping from his nose. He didn't look afraid. That was his first mistake, or perhaps his greatest weapon. Humans were new to this sector of the galaxy. To the Krylorians, they looked like hairless, soft, squishy toys that had accidentally wandered out of a nursery. "I have an appointment," Ronin said, his voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "And I believe Warlord Xylia is expecting the tribute from Earth." The guard laughed, a sound like boulders grinding together. "Tribute? You are the tribute. Go inside. If she leaves any bones, we will use them for toothpicks." The gates groaned open, revealing a hall that was less a throne room and more a cavern of intimidation. Torches burned with green chemical fire, casting long, dancing shadows against walls decorated with the shattered armor of defeated enemies. In the center of the room, seated on a throne carved from the skull of a subterranean leviathan, sat Xylia. She was terrifying. She was magnificent. Standing, she would easily top 9 feet. Her skin was a deep, iridescent crimson, shimmering like polished ruby in the torchlight. Massive, curved horns spiraled from her temples, adorned with rings of gold and platinum, each ring representing a conquered city. Her armor was minimal, showcasing muscles that could crush a tank, yet there was an elegance to her lethality. But it was her eyes that caught Ronin. They were vertical slits of burning gold, glowing with a bioluminescent intensity that seemed to x-ray his very soul. "So," her voice boomed, vibrating in Ronin's chest cavity, "this is the diplomat the soft-skins send me." A runt, a snack. Ronin walked forward. The entire court, dozens of massive, scarred warriors, went silent. They expected the human to cower. They expected him to beg. Ronin stopped at the base of the throne stairs. He looked up, craning his neck until it hurt. "I am Ronin," he said, "and I'm not a snack. I'm here to ask you to stop raiding our supply convoys." Xylia leaned forward, the movement causing the ground to tremble slightly. She descended the stairs one heavy step at a time until she loomed over him like a falling skyscraper. The heat radiating from her body was intense, smelling of ozone and sulfur. She brought her face inches from his. Ronin could see the faint, jagged scars on her cheek, the way her golden eyes twitched with something that wasn't rage. "And why?" she whispered, a sound like a velvet-wrapped earthquake. "Should I listen to something I could snap with 2 fingers?" She raised a massive hand, her claws sharp enough to slice diamond. She placed a finger under Ronin's chin, forcing his head up. It was a test, a predator playing with food. But Ronin saw something the others didn't. Being a xenolinguist meant reading more than just words. It meant reading micro-expressions. He saw the tension in her jaw, not from anger but from exhaustion. He saw the slight tremor in her hand, not from adrenaline but from the weight of holding an empire together for 20 years without a moment of peace. He saw a woman who was tired of being a monster. He didn't pull away, he didn't tremble. "Because," Ronin said softly, ignoring the hundreds of warriors watching them, "you look like you need a break, Xylia." The use of her name without a title drew a collective gasp from the room. Swords were half drawn. This was death. This was heresy. Xylia froze. Her golden eyes widened. "What did you say?" "I said you looked tired." Ronin did the unthinkable. He raised his hand. His small, pale human hand, he reached up. He couldn't reach her face, so he settled for the side of her arm, just below the shoulder pauldron. But then, acting on an instinct that defied all logic, Xylia lowered her head slightly, confused by his lack of fear. Ronin took the opportunity. He reached higher and gently patted the rough, warm skin between her horns. "It's okay," he murmured, treating the most dangerous warlord in the galaxy like a stressed-out golden retriever. "You've done enough fighting for today." Time stopped. The court held its breath. The guards prepared to wipe Ronin's blood off the floor, but Xylia didn't strike. A strange color began to rise in her crimson cheeks, a deep glowing purple. It started at her neck and flooded her face. Her eyes, usually sharp and focused, went unfocused and hazy. Her mouth opened, but no roar came out. The pat was a gesture of dominance in no culture known to the galaxy. Yet to Xylia, who had known only violence, pain, and political maneuvering since birth, the gentle, rhythmic touch of a warm hand on her head was overloading. It was a sensory input she had no defense against. Xylia stammered, her voice lost its thunder. The massive greatsword in her right hand, a blade that had tasted the blood of kings, slipped from her fingers. It hit the stone floor with a deafening clang that echoed through the silent hall. Xylia's knees buckled. She didn't fall from weakness, she melted. She slumped forward, her massive frame descending until she was kneeling in front of Ronin, bringing them to eye level.
"Why is it warm?" she whispered, her voice trembling.
"Why are you not running?" "Because I'm not afraid of you," Ronin said, continuing the gentle patting motion, moving his hand to scratch lightly behind her horn. "I think you're just lonely." The dam broke. Xylia, the butcher of the nebulas, the Iron Queen, let out a sound that was half sob, half purr. She lunged forward. Ronin braced himself for impact, but instead of being crushed, he was enveloped. Xylia wrapped her massive arms around him, burying her face in his small shoulder. She squeezed, tight enough to crack a rib, but careful enough to show she was trying to be gentle. She smelled of rain and hot metal. "Hold me," she commanded, though it sounded like a plea. "Do not let go, little soft thing, do not let go." Ronin wrapped his arms as far around her broad back as they would go, patting her spine. "I've got you, Xylia, I've got you." The court watched in stunned silence. Their invincible warlord was currently cuddling a human diplomat on the floor of the throne room. "Clear the room," Xylia roared suddenly, her face still buried in Ronin's neck, her voice muffled but dangerous. "Everyone out! If anyone speaks of this, I will mount their heads on the outer wall." The hall emptied in record time. Even the bravest warriors didn't want to witness the confusion of their queen. When they were alone, Xylia pulled back, but she didn't let go of Ronin's waist. Her face was still flushed a deep, luminous purple. She looked at him with a mixture of wonder and hunger. "You possess a strange magic, Ronin," she said, tracing the line of his jaw with a claw that was larger than his entire hand. "You touched me, no one touches me. They only strike or bow. That's a sad way to live," Ronin said, reaching out to touch her cheek. Her skin was incredibly smooth despite the rugged appearance, hot to the touch like a fever. "It is the way of power," she sighed, leaning into his palm. "But I am tired of power today." "I want more of the patting," Ronin smiled. "I can do that." The next few days on Krylor were unlike anything in the planet's history. The raids on human convoys stopped immediately. Instead, the Iron Citadel became the site of the galaxy's most confusing diplomatic summit. Ronin was moved from the guest quarters to the royal suite. Technically, he was a hostage to keep up appearances, but the guards whispered. They whispered about how the queen would rush through war council meetings just to return to her chambers. They whispered about the strange, soft humming sounds coming from behind the heavy blast doors. Inside the suite, the dynamic was very different. Xylia sat on the edge of her massive bed, stripped of her armor, wearing only a loose silk robe that did little to hide her imposing physique. Ronin sat next to her, looking like a child beside a statue. "Explain Earth to me again," Xylia demanded gently, lying back and pulling Ronin against her side. She treated him like a heated body pillow, protective and possessive. "Well," Ronin said, resting his head on her chest, listening to the slow, powerful thrum of her dual hearts. "We don't have warlords, we have bureaucracies. Lots of paperwork, people wait in lines." "Barbaric," Xylia scoffed. "If I want something, I take it. Like I took you." "You didn't take me," Ronin corrected, tracing the intricate tribal tattoos on her arm. "I stayed. There's a difference." Xylia went quiet. She lifted her hand and looked at it, a weapon of war, then looked at Ronin. "You're so small," she murmured, "so fragile. If I rolled over in my sleep, I would end you. Yet you make me feel safe. It makes no tactical sense. Love isn't tactical, Xylia." She stiffened. "Love? That is a word for weak species. Krylorians have bonding. It is a contract of blood and steel." "Okay, call it bonding," Ronin shrugged. "But your heart rate just jumped 20 beats per minute." Xylia growled low in her throat, a vibrating rumble that shook the bed frame. "You are insolent, I should crush you." But you won't. No, she admitted, pulling him closer until he was practically underneath her. I will keep you. You are my stress relief, my little anchor. The intimacy was broken by the harsh blare of a klaxon. The war alarm. Xylia's demeanor shifted instantly. The soft purring woman vanished, the warlord returned. She sat up, her eyes hardening into molten gold. Report, she shouted at the comms panel on the wall. My liege, a panicked voice crackled. It is General Vorag. He has challenged your rule. He claims you have gone soft. He claims the human pet has poisoned your mind. He demands the right of combat. Xylia stood up, her robe falling away as she reached for her armor. The transformation was terrifying to behold. Vorag, she hissed, her voice dripping with venom. He has coveted my throne for years. He uses you as an excuse. She turned to Ronin. Stay here. I will go down there, tear his head off, and we will resume our nap. Ronin stood up, grabbing his enviro coat. I'm coming with you. Xylia paused, holding her breastplate. No, Vorag will kill you just to hurt me. You are small. You are not a warrior. Ronin walked over to her. He couldn't help her with the heavy armor, but he handed her the sword she had dropped the day they met. I'm not a warrior, Xylia, but I'm your partner. And on Earth, we don't let our partners fight alone. You are a fool, she said. But she smiled, a sharp, feral grin that promised violence to everyone but him. But you are my fool. Come, stay behind me. If he looks at you, I will eviscerate him. The arena of judgment was a pit of soaked sand surrounded by thousands of screaming Krylorians. Rain poured down, mixing with the mud. General Vorag stood in the center. He was even bigger than Xylia, a mountain of muscle and scars, wielding a warhammer that looked like it weighed half a ton. Look! Vorag bellowed, pointing a massive finger at the royal box where Xylia emerged, Ronin stepping out beside her. She brings her pet. She brings the weakness to the sacred ground, the crowd murmured. They were torn. They loved Xylia's strength, but the sight of the small, pale human standing next to their warlord was jarring. Xylia leaped from the balcony, landing in the mud with a shockwave. Ronin took the stairs, arriving a moment later to stand just outside the combat circle. Vorag, Xylia shouted, drawing her greatsword. You speak of weakness, yet you challenge me only when you think I am distracted. That is the tactic of a coward. I speak of purity, Vorag roared. Krylor needs strength, not cuddling. With a roar that shook the stadium, Vorag charged. The fight was brutal. It was a clash of titans, steel sparked against steel, illuminating the rain. Vorag was stronger, but Xylia was faster. However, Xylia was distracted. Every time Vorag swung, he tried to angle his attacks toward where Ronin was standing, forcing Xylia to overextend herself to block the line of sight. She protects the meat. Vorag laughed, landing a heavy blow on Xylia's shoulder. She stumbled, grimacing in pain. Blue blood leaked from a crack in her armor. Xylia, Ronin shouted. Stay back, she gasped, parrying another blow that drove her to her knees. Vorag loomed over her, raising his hammer for the killing blow. Die, traitor, and then I will eat your little toy. Ronin didn't think. He didn't calculate, he acted. He pulled the only weapon he had, a standard-issue flare gun from his survival kit. It was designed to signal for rescue, not to kill warlords. But Ronin wasn't aiming to kill. Hey, ugly! Ronin screamed, stepping into the mud. Vorag turned his massive head. What? Ronin fired. The flare didn't hit Vorag. It hit the highly polished metal of his helmet's visor. The magnesium charge exploded in a blinding flash of white light, burning at 3,000 degrees. Vorag shrieked, blinded, dropping his hammer to claw at his helmet. My eyes, the fire! The crowd went silent. The tiny human had just blinded a general. Xylia didn't waste the moment. She surged up from the mud, a crimson blur of vengeance. She didn't use her sword, she used her fist. She delivered an uppercut that lifted Vorag off his feet and sent him crashing onto his back. Before he could recover, Xylia's blade was at his throat. Yield, she snarled, her chest heaving. I yield, Vorag wheezed, beaten not by strength alone but by a distraction from the weakling. Xylia kicked him away and turned to the crowd. She raised her sword, and then with her other hand she pointed at Ronin. You call him weak, she roared at her people. You call him small, yet he stands where you would flee. He strikes where you would cower. He is not a pet. She walked over to Ronin, who was shaking slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. She knelt in the mud, ignoring the rain, ignoring the blood on her armor. He is my mate, Xylia declared, her voice carrying to the top rows of the arena. And the co-ruler of Krylor. Anyone who touches him dies. She looked at Ronin, her golden eyes burning with intense pride. "You fought for me, little anchor." "I just used a flare gun," Ronin said breathlessly. "You fought," she insisted. She leaned forward, and in front of thousands of her subjects, she pressed her forehead against his, the Krylorian equivalent of a kiss. "Now let's go home, I require the padding." 6 months later. The rain on Krylor hadn't stopped, it never did, but the atmosphere in the Iron Citadel had changed. The screams of tortured prisoners were replaced by the sounds of construction and trade negotiations. Ronin sat on the balcony of the royal suite reading a datapad. He wore a modified Krylorian coat, a gift from Xylia. The blast doors opened and Xylia entered. She looked different. Her armor was gone, replaced by loose flowing robes. She moved slower, with a careful grace. She sat next to Ronin, the floor groaning slightly under her weight. She pulled him into her lap, a habit she refused to break. "The council is complaining again," she grumbled, resting her chin on top of his head. "They say the new trade route with Earth is too profitable. They missed the rating. They'll get over it once the luxury goods arrive," Ronin said, leaning back against her massive chest. "Did you tell them?" "Not yet," Xylia said softly. Her hand moved to her abdomen. It was subtle, but there was a slight curve there that hadn't been there before. Humans and Krylorians were not supposed to be compatible. Biology said no. Physics said no. But apparently, ancient Krylorian genetics were more adaptable than anyone thought. Or perhaps, as Xylia insisted, the bonding was more than just a word. "A hybrid," Xylia whispered, a hint of fear in her voice that she would never show to her soldiers. "What if he is small like you? The world will eat him. Then we teach him to use a flare gun." Ronin smiled, placing his hand over hers on her stomach. "And if she's big like me?" Xylia asked. "Earth will fear her. Then I'll teach her how to be gentle," Ronin said. He reached up, performing the ritual that had started it all. He patted her cheek. Xylia leaned into the touch, her eyes closing, her breathing syncing with his. The terrifying warlord was gone, replaced by a mother, a wife, and a partner. "You changed everything, Ronin," she said. "You walked into the dragon's den and patted the dragon." "Best decision of my life," Ronin replied. Xylia chuckled, a deep rumbling sound that warmed him to his bones. "Mine too, little anchor, mine too." As they sat there watching the ash rain fall over their kingdom, the galaxy seemed a little less cold and a little less impossible. It turns out sometimes the only thing a monster needs to stop being a monster is a hug.